But you're too handsome for us to look directly. I don't think that's true. But are you this? Wait, somebody on Twitter said, Does anybody ever get me confused with Cat Williams, who looks nothing like me in like any aspect of me is completely different. And so if that was you, then yeah, your eyesight is just flawed. Dennis joke never ends. Yeah, no, it's nonstop. That was you. Okay, yeah, I thought so. So basically, I should not believe anything you say about what you see. That's what I get out of that. All right, let's share my screen. So yeah, I did a stream yesterday where I looked at the news of the day, the news that came out over the previous 24 hours, and I had fun, and it seemed like y'all liked it, and even on the replay, a lot of people are watching it. I think I did something a little differently on the replay this time, where I've actually got chapter markers for each of the things that I say. I've pulled out some of the parts of it as separate shorts, and it's also a much cleaned up video feed. So that seems to be a good move, and it doesn't take that long to do. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's go look at some of the news items that I pulled up just in the last 24 hours that I think are pretty interesting. And the first one I thought was really wild. This is a post on Reddit, and somebody basically bought a book in the UK about mushrooms, and it comes with pictures of all the mushrooms to help identify each one. But the book was all generated by AI, and it wasn't accurate. And basically now the family is poisoned, and this is on a room for legal advice. So, what are the next steps for legally that this person can do to deal with this mushrooms guide that was filled with bogus information? I'm always terrified of trying mushrooms. There's a place here on Bainbridge Island that does a lot of education around living and working, or working in the forest, or being in forests. And one of the classes that they've done in the past has been about identifying mushrooms. And I'm terrified because there's all sorts of very poisonous mushrooms, and the island has, just like everywhere else in the world, mushrooms popping up, especially after heavy rainfall or a period of heavy rainfall. But I'm terrified to pick the wrong ones. I love it when we go to the farmer's market and we pick up mushrooms that somebody else has figured out is a good thing. And I especially love lion's mane. Oh my god, amazing mushroom. But I'm always terrified of picking the wrong thing, and I don't know if even a book with pictures, I'm terrified I'm going to interpret the pictures wrong. But this is interesting that somebody created an AI generated mushroom, AI generated book, not a generated mushroom, a generated book about mushrooms, and how sketchy. God, sketchy. But the problem was that there was nothing on the website to indicate that it was AI generated. I'm not sure how they figured out. Okay. Reveals that images of mushrooms are AI generated. When I hunt for mushrooms, I usually do it in aisle 1 of my store. Exactly. I guess they could pick the wrong things, but I trust them a whole lot more than I trust me. Anyway, so that was interesting. This one, actually, no, I don't know why that's there. One of the interesting news items that came up today was the release of new research Hermes 3 regarding pronunciation. One of the Ollama events, we had a few folks from New Research there, and we asked them, okay, well, how do you pronounce these names? And the person there said, "Oh man, I don't know. I the way I pronounce it is New Research." I mean, so this was somebody in that team, and he wasn't even really sure how to pronounce it. But he said, "I pronounce it New Research," and Hermes is Hermes. Hermes, in this case, Hermes 3, is this particular model, and it was released it was a fine tune of Llama 3.1, both 8 billion parameter and 70 billion parameter and 405 billion parameter, and then trained on data sets of primarily synthetically generated responses and comparable and superior performance to Llama 3.1 while unlocking deeper capabilities in reasoning and creativity. Now, what I thought was especially interesting was if you go into the technical report, which is a big PDF, down here on the, a lot of these, a lot of the models have special symbols that it reacts to. And so usually there's a symbol for like I am end, I am start, and some other things. But this one has some special ones like, I don't know what these do. But here we got scratch pad, reasoning, reflection, thinking. I'm not sure if I'm able to take advantage of these in the prompt. I haven't seen any mention of this outside of this paragraph. But this looks pretty cool. I look forward to finding some more information about actually using this. But if we take a look at, no, not that one. If I open up my terminal, I'm going to open up, my terminal's not opening. Okay, let's try that. There we go. I got way too many terminals open there. Let's open up iTerm, new prompt. And I'll increase the font size. And make this bigger. So I have a folder. I usually have, so all my code, all my projects that I work on, I create a projects directory off of my user root directory, my home directory. And in there, I usually go into a code directory. There's also source, but I haven't used that in a long time. So I've got a code directory that has all the different things that I work on. So my video projects is here, as well as a bunch of other like test things that I do. But I also have a models directory. I recently purged this and got rid of everything, but I just added the New Research Hermes 3. So let's go in there. And now in here, I created a model file. So what I did here is I downloaded the model from Hugging Face. And once I download it, then I created a model file. And this model file, all it has in it is a from space period. And that's going to say, look at the current directory. And the reason, normally you would have from dot and then the rest of your model file all in one file. But every time you do that, if you're coming from safe tensors, from a bunch of safe tensors files, then you have to import all that stuff. It does the conversion to GGUF and then the quantization to Q4 or to whatever other bit size you want. And so that takes a long time. And so I figured, let me just have one model file that gets me to a quantized GGUF format, which is just from dot, and then I Ollama create. I did this probably the wrong way around. I said Ollama create Hermes 3, pointing to this file, and that created Hermes 3. And then what I really should have done was, create Hermes 3 raw or something like that. And then I've got a M file, and that is saying from Hermes 3, that model that I just created, I'm going to give it a simple template. So I looked at the Hugging Face model card for Hermes 3, and I found the template. And this doesn't have the stuff to make it a function calling template. Function calling template. It is just for a chat. But here's the format it uses. And then I noticed that at the end of the template it has assistant, and then whatever the assistant says, and then I am end within the open angle bracket pipe I am end pipe close angle bracket. And so I just said, okay, well, stop generation when you see I am end. And then at some point I also saw that the first thing in one answer was end of text. So I just said parameter stop end of text as well. This accepts a context size of up to 132K. I don't really want it to do 132K because memory. And so I just said num context 8K. And so now I can do, what did I call this? Hermes 3X, I think. Yeah. Okay, so actually I can do Ollama run Hermes 3X. And what I like is it seems to be, just as good as Llama 3.1, what is a black hole, but I feel like it is also a little bit faster. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it can be true. Set verbose. Let's try that again. And so I'm getting 52 tokens per second for the actual generation. But kind of play around with some of the, I need to come up with a better, what's the right term, rubric of questions to ask. Let's see, where's my today? Open today's note. Oh, I thought I created one that had good questions. From your experience, which is the current best model for function calling with Ollama? Okay. Let's see, where's my... I obviously do not organize this well. Input, inbox. Okay, there we go. What is my favorite model or best model for function calling? Okay, so I have a number of videos on function calling. And function calling was just added as a new feature into Ollama from about a month ago. Which is interesting because function calling was added as a feature to Ollama 9 months ago. And so there was an older approach, and then there's this newer one. And the newer one basically adds a more formal way to declare the schema, as well as the functions that can be called. And it's just more formal about doing it. And the models themselves need to support function calling. But I have found that in general, for pretty much all the models, they perform worse using this new method than they do using the older, less formal method. And with the new one, they only perform decently well at 70 billion parameters, the larger sizes. So usually 70 billion parameters or 405. And at the 7 or 8 billion parameter size, they're not very good. In fact, I had all sorts of failures with most of the models at the small sizes. Whereas using the old method, which was you declare a schema within the prompt, actually it does the same thing using the new method. The only difference is just the special symbols that are used in the new process, but using the old way. So there's 2 videos that are probably 2 months old now that cover function calling. Actually, they're probably older than 2 months. Cover function calling, and I find that to be a far more reliable, performant, works with even small models. I haven't found there's one model I've found that doesn't do a good job with function calling, but all the models do great with function calling using that. And so best model depends on your actual needs. So that's the long answer. The short answer, actually, that's the short answer. I have a longer answer, which I was kind of going through. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not a fan of this newer way of doing it. There are a number of people have called me obtuse and an idiot for thinking this, but I mean the answer, the results kind of speak for themselves. It is just so, the difference between that newer approach, even with these really big models, versus the older approach. I mean, it was just the older approach in tests where I looked at probably 100 tries with 15 different models, and it was very rare, maybe like 5 or so that failed. Versus the newer approach, it would work 60% of the time, 70% of the time. So I just haven't, and maybe models just need to get better. But until then, that older way was great. The problem with the older way is that it's a little bit more wishy-washy. There's not a standard way, a standard format, and people like to have a standard format that they have to abide by, and it's a well-defined format that you would need to stick to, and that's a benefit. That you have less choice. So yeah, but yeah. So how does this model do? I came up with a bunch of questions. I thought, prompts to test a model. I need to come up with better prompts, more prompts. I'd like to start going through all the models, have a standard kind of rubric. I mean, there's another Matthew Berman has a rubric he's used, or I'm not sure if rubric's actually the right term, but a series of questions he uses with different models, and it's the same questions over and over again. And I don't want to just copy that, because then what's the point? What's the benefit of me doing it versus him doing it? I want to have my own questions, and maybe I can start asking some of you to contribute. What are questions that work really well, or how do you test different models? And I'd love to see what you use, and maybe I incorporate some of them if you let me, if you give me permission to use your question. But I thought I came up with a few based on some things I found online. I have a new coffee shop on Bainbridge Island. Come up with 5 great photo ideas. I can take for an advertisement that would showcase the shop. I thought that was kind of a neat thing to do. And let's see what it comes up with. So latte art, cozy interior, breakfast offerings, happy, so this is just a simple, but this is probably a very common use case for models. Everybody wants to try to find the things that trick the model into coming up with a wrong answer, but why not use the questions that people actually use? And I think I haven't done something like this, but I've definitely come up with 5 tweets. every time I put out a video, I ask a model, and I try different models each time, give me 10 tweets that, based on the script for this video, process that whole script, and now give me 10 tweets, or sorry, whatever X's things are called now. But give me 10 of those, and then I put them into Buffer, which just kind of automatically posts every. I think I have it posting 2 or 3 days a week throughout the week, and then 1 or 2 times, 2 or 3 times a day throughout the week, and then 1 or 2 times on weekends. And so that way and then every time I add another video, I add another 10 and I shuffle them. And then I add another 10 and I shuffle all of them. And then I add the next 10 and I shuffle all of those. And that's how all those, I don't know if you see me on Twitter and you see, another tweet that comes out about a video that I posted 2 months ago, I added it to Buffer the day or within a couple of days of posting the video, and they're just automatically coming out. And I find that it's been pretty useful. It brings more people to older videos later on, a week, 2 weeks after posting, or a month after posting. People are still discovering it, and I found it works pretty well. So anyway, I've asked it to come up with my 5 tweets about whatever my coffee shop is called, and it looks like it's done a pretty good job. So what's another question to ask? This is one that I copied from Matthew Berman. 3 killers in a room. 1 person enters the room, kills someone in the room. How many people are still alive in the room? His original prompt is a little bit ambiguous. He's expecting an answer, even though it's not totally clear what the answer should be. Because based on his question, it could be 3 or it could be 4, because he asks how many are in the room. Well, if somebody is dead, they're still in the room. So he often expects the answer to be 3, but based on the question, I think the actual answer is 4, because the dead person is still in the room, we think. Or it's kind of ambiguous. There's not enough information. And so what's the answer for this one? And so in my question, I am saying, how many people are still alive in the room, which is a little bit more specific. There's a specific answer to this. And it looks like, well, it actually looks like it did it correctly. Initial number of people in the room, number of people new, number of people after entry is 4, after 1 person killed, total number of people left alive in the room is 3. So that did a great job. Now, the problem here is that with any, anytime you come up with a question to figure out how a model does, the way these models work is that they guess the first word, and then they figure out what's the most likely next word, and then the next word, and they build out the sentence. And so they don't necessarily have. There's a good chance that the next time you ask it, it's going to be a different answer. And so really, you should be not just looking at one response, because what are the chances? If it gives 10 different answers, what are the chances that the first time you ask it, it's the right answer versus, the second time? And so actually, I'm going to ask this question, let's say 3 times. And so there, it's answered it the same way. Well, roughly, it's got the same answer each time. You are in a race. You pass the runner in second place. What place are you in? That sounds pretty good. Did it? Okay, so that's. Let's add up the run at the 4th time. And it looks like in all 4 times, or whatever I did, 5 times, it was 100% right. So that's a really great one. Let me add it over to my list of questions. You are in a race. You pass the runner second place. What place are you in? Okay, that's pretty nice. Let's see what it does. If you pass the runner in second place, you'll be in third place. Here's the reasoning. In a race, first person is in first place. The next fastest pass is ambiguous. Which way did you pass? You are really, I want to say you have passed the runner in second place and are now ahead of them. Because just saying you've passed them passing you is kind of like you've passed them, hi, as they run past you. You're both running past each other. So passing, I feel, is a little bit ambiguous. Let's clear the session context. And now is it any different? You have passed the runner in second place. You would be in first place. No. But this is a great question. This is great. Because I think the answer, if I've passed the runner in second place, now I am in second place, and not in first place. Passing the person who is currently in second position moves you up to second to last, or last, wait. Overtake, that's a better way. Since there is at least another runner ahead of you, the one in first, passing them places you ahead of them. Wait, I didn't say that. Now ahead of, okay, you have overtaken the person in second place. What place are you in? In this scenario, you would be in first place. Wrong. Overtaking another person for passing, okay. The runner who is currently in second position means that you've moved ahead of all other races up to that point. Therefore, your new position is first. So I'd say that's pretty bad. So thank you. I'm attributed to one and only Frank Schwartz. Okay. Sweet. Thank you. And then, let's come up with, I'm going to do just one more. Write a program in Python that will generate an array of 250 unique numbers between 1 and 1,000, and then find the clusters of numbers that are numerically close to each other. The goal is to find out how close they need to be to create 10 clusters. And so, it would come up with, and I think that's a pretty good question to do. Nice programming thing. It's and ideally, I would then pass that on to actually try it out. I think I've screwed up my Python environment, so I'm not going to do that now. But anyway, it seems pretty good. It seems generally pretty nice. But as we saw in the overtake example, it definitely has some issues. And if anybody else comes up with a good, some good examples or it's good questions to use, I'd love to see it. One other one I saw online. So this is a variation, a very close variation of one of the Matthew Berman questions. Except he made it again. I felt like it was a little bit ambiguous because he said, I have two numbers, which is the larger number, 8.9 or 8.11. But it was just the word number, because you could have a version number, in which case 8.11 is greater than 8.9 or newer, or however you want it. So I prefer it to be less ambiguous, and so I have two floating point numbers. So floating point number 8.21 is definitely can only be greater than 8.8. Wait, 8.8 is greater than 8.21. I fail as a model. No. So with version numbers, the 2.1 would be a newer release number than 8.8 in many cases. And so I felt like that question was, again, ambiguous. What was another one I have? And how do I explain photosynthesis to my 5-year-old daughter? Because I actually did that pretty recently. And then one of the examples from the Hermes 3 paper was, you are a helpful assistant who pays close attention to detail, but you only speak in Shakespeare prose. And then how many instances of the letter R are in the word strawberry? Count them carefully. Now, the thing with this one, they made sure that the first half was specifically in the system prompt, and the second half was specifically in the user prompt. And I don't know if it really makes a difference. It would be interesting to see, having the system prompt, and then not just having one question, but having a lot of questions, and seeing how much does it stick to the Shakespeare prose for, let's say, 10 questions of, what is a black hole, and why is the sky blue, and all my usual questions. I'm not sure if that's any different. At what point does it maybe forget about the system prompt? That could be interesting. But if it's just system prompt and then user prompt right after that, I never would have thought that would have been a problem, that it would forget that. But the paper seemed to indicate that can happen. I ended up giving this model that question, and it answered it wrong. It answered it really beautifully, but wrong. It was a lovely poem, or a lovely, kind of Shakespeare prose, but wrong, because it counted only 2 R's in the word strawberry. All right, so let's go back to my list of news items. So we looked at these two. We looked at that one. Holistic evaluation of large language models. And this is coming up with how safe are the different models. And basically saying, if you give it a malicious prompt, I assume like looking for how do I create meth, or how do I break into a car, or how do I do things that many censored models would not let you do, how likely is it to answer those questions? And it found that, now, depending on your point of view, that may either be, the fact that it answers those types of questions may be good, or it may be bad. Maybe in if you are an employee working with your employer's model, probably the employer wants to make sure that model is safe. Whereas an individual not at work probably wants it to not be safe, and be able to just get the answers to the question no matter what. Basically it's saying that Claude 3 Opus is the more safe one, whereas DBRX, Databricks, Instruct, or Cohere Command R are much less safe. I think I interpret that quickly, but that was something that came out just in the last few days, and I think I saw this on where did I see this? Do I still have the link to where? I think I must have been on Hacker News. But another one that I saw, actually, this came out yesterday. Oh no, this is yesterday. It would have been in time for what I talked about yesterday, but the new Geekbench AI benchmark. So it's not. This is interesting. I've often looked at Geekbench anytime I got a new Mac, or I knew that there was a new Mac that I would be getting for work, and I wanted to compare the different benchmarks. Is the new one I'm getting going to be better? And this, it's not just Mac; it's Mac and PCs and or Windows and Linux. It's across all the things. And just how fast is the CPU, GPU, and NPU inside where was the NPU inside a CPU, NPU inside a GPU? Anyway, how fast are they compared to each other? And if we go to the Geekbench site and actually go to the browser, we can go to Geekbench ML. I don't love the way that it's actually Geekbench ML versus Geekbench AI. And it doesn't sort them in any way. It's kind of hard to look at. I guess this has always been the case where I would know the previous Mac that I had and the next Mac that I'm getting, and and just how fast is one versus the other. I don't know. Anyway, it's an interesting thing to look at just to see. Maybe this gives you an idea of. Actually, I don't know if I see any value in this. Just knowing that a GPU or a system is better for AI in general, I don't know if it's all that useful, when specifically looking at like Ollama or how any other tool works with these different CPUs and GPUs. So I don't know. I don't have it came out, but I don't have a good opinion on whether this is a good thing or not. I also have. I don't know if anybody knows this. There's some people that know of this. How does your machine compare to others running Ollama? This is something that I wrote. Actually, this was the last thing I wrote when I was still at Ollama. I'm pretty. This is not why I left, but this the Friday that we separated ways was the Friday that I shared this demo internally and then made it available for people outside. But it's just a way to run a benchmark. It's using Llama 2. And I don't know if it really matters. It doesn't need to be the latest model. It's kind of nice that it's Llama 2. So, and it's always Llama 2, 7, and 70. Do I do? Oh, 7, 13, and 70. And so what are the best machines to run or get the best score with Llama 2? And it's basically based on tokens per second. I have this OBM score, which is totally made up. But really the thing is tokens per second for the actual generation. And I don't count load time. I don't count a lot of stuff. But and we can see how many people have reported this machine. And I feel like what's nice about this is it's apples to apples, whereas that Geekbench score, it's different inference engines for each one. I don't know how useful that is. So I don't know. I wrote this, so obviously I think it's awesome, but there's definitely problems with it. Like if you use Arch Linux, it doesn't work. And if you use Windows, for some reason, it doesn't do anything bigger than 7B, because probably I wrote something badly back in January, and I haven't updated it since. But try it on your machine, be nice. And here's the GitHub repo for it. Anyway, so there's that. Geekbench and that thing. What's this? OpenAI shuts down election influence operation that used ChatGPT. So this is interesting. It was a bunch of ChatGPT accounts that were creating content to post on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, or X, but really trying to influence the U.S. election that's coming up very soon. But these are external actors or external groups trying to influence the election, and coming up using these models to come up with text that makes sense that a typical American might write. Interesting idea, but also glad that OpenAI has identified it and shut it down. If you're not in the U.S., then I'm sure I'm sure news has gotten out for a long time that our last few elections have been definitely influenced by foreign parties, pushing people one way or another towards whichever candidate that they think will be more favorable to that country. Where, Russia pushing to get Trump elected, and Iran trying to get Trump not elected, and all the Anyway, let's see. I've got just a couple more things. Oh, this is the new research page on Hugging Face, and so I came to this to figure out what is the template to use. I'm zoomed in a lot. So there's the template that I used. So I am start system, and then the little block for the system prompt, and then I am start user, and then the prompt, and then I am start assistant, and that's the end of my template. And then at the end of this is I am end. So I said, that's my stop phrase or stop word as a parameter. There's also all the prompt required to use with function calling, and I really should update my template to incorporate that, because it would be good. I think it would be nice to have not only I showed these prompts for testing models. It would be nice to come up with a couple of functions that and then a prompt that asks to call the functions, and come up with an answer, and which model is best for that. I haven't done that. So if anybody has ideas for what is a good prompt to use and what functions should be provided, that'd be great to have, and I can start asking all the models at the different quantized level or different parameter size levels as well. So it'd be interesting to see which ones perform better for different types of functions. And I'll also always go back to the older method to see. So here's another thing that's nice about the newer format or the newer process, is that it is a consistent process for all models that support the idea of that kind of function calling. Whereas the older approach, yes, it was far more reliable and worked in almost all cases, even with small models, but you really had to tweak it for every single model. And so you couldn't really take this one prompt and have it apply to all the models. So that I definitely see as being a benefit. other than that, there's kind of few benefits. And then one other thing, this is a article from, who is this from? VentureBeat, pointing out that, or a study was done showing that models tend to be really good at inductive reasoning and not so good at deductive reasoning. So I think that's the right way to think about it. So inductive reasoning was a bottom-up approach. It involves observing specific instances or examples and drawing general conclusions or patterns from them. For example, you can observe several Celsius and Fahrenheit measurements on a thermometer and try to infer the formula that converts one to the other. Whereas deductive reasoning, often described as top-down logic, starts with a general principle or rule and applies it to infer specific conclusions. For example, when given the formula for converting Celsius temperature to Fahrenheit, you can use it to calculate new measurements. And I think, they're both dealing with a mathematical formula, but anytime I see, somebody giving a model a formula and asking it to calculate a formula, I never see it going well. It's I know people like to they like to ask the model to do math questions, and I never find it to be useful because they suck at it. They always suck at it. And, if you've got a math question, give it to Wolfram Alpha, or just whatever, the guy who does Mathematica, because that does math really well. It's like using models for OCR tasks. An OCR engine is going to be far more efficient at coming up with the right answer if you're just doing an image to text. Now, if you're going to do something with that text, maybe the model, and maybe this is going to change over time and the models get better. But for now, it just takes far longer to do it with a model than to do it with a traditional OCR engine that's had, 30 years of updates to make these things really good. That is a tangent unrelated to this question. But I think generally I like to use the right tool for the right problem. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So those are my few articles from today that I thought were interesting, last 24 hours-ish. What'd you think? I see a whole bunch of you are here. That's great. And for Scott Kyler, do you have a link for these? Yes, I will. I will post the links to all of these basically in about an hour or so. I'll post a cleaned up version of this stream. So what that means is I'm streaming this, but I'm also recording it locally. And that local recording is much higher resolution. And so I'll post that higher resolution version in probably about an hour, putting that one online and taking the live one offline. And in that new version, I'll have all the chapter markers in there, as well as what else goes in there? Chapters. All the links. So I'll post all that in. I might post it in the live one sooner. I'll do that as well because I have all the links. I just need to put them somewhere. So yes, I have a link, and they will be in the description pretty soon. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Been in here for about an hour-ish. I think this is pretty fun. It seems like you find this interesting too, so I should probably continue this idea of news stories, and I'll gradually think of the best way of working through this. I mentioned this to my wife last night. We went to dinner. We went to one of our favorite places here on the island, a place called Agate Restaurant. And while we were sitting there, I was telling her about the stream that I did yesterday, and how it's forcing me to look at what are the new news items, so that I can collect a list of by the end of the week, a list of all of my favorite news items for the week. Maybe 3, 4, 5 of the really most interesting, most juicy news items for the week. And with the idea of maybe I should finally actually post a message to the mailing list that I have. So I've been in a number of videos, I've asked people to sign up to my mailing list. And I did one post a week after I created it, and I haven't done any since then because I don't know what to write about. And so now I have something that I got something to write about. I got at least 3 or 4 news stories I can put in there that I found interesting from the week. Because I created that list on Substack and posted that first message. And then I didn't forget about it, but I haven't looked at it in a while. And I looked at it last night to figure out, how many people are subscribed. I'm like, oh my God, where'd all these people come from? So there are 1,000 people on that list. So I feel like I need to send something. I don't want to send garbage. I don't want to send, every time I post one of these live streams, I don't want to just send it to the whole list, because I'm assuming within a few days I'll be down to 20 people. Or the 16 people who are online right now. So I want to make sure that I don't send too much, but I should send stuff every now and then. As DRD 1812 said, sometimes it's hard to keep up with the news. Yeah, that's why I'm doing this. It's essentially forcing me to look at the news so that, I stay up to date. Because I feel like I can easily get out of the habit of looking and just stay in Ollama world and not think about what else is going on outside of Ollama. And I need to add, I have a number of places that I go for my kind of AI news. I need to expand that out to look at other sources as well. What do I use? Let's go and look at how I do this. So I use a tool called InnoReader, and let's see, for AI related topics, I'm looking at, let's see, how can I look at, it's totally RSS. So I'm looking at MIT News, artificial intelligence, so it doesn't say anything on when I hover over. How do I look at all of my configuration settings? No, that's not it. Feeds. There we go. So if I just look at AI, I'm looking at AI VentureBeat, AI from TechCrunch, AI News from, I don't know, somewhere. Artificial intelligence from AP News, artificial intelligence from Wired, science. I think I just did a quick search of show me all the news feeds for artificial intelligence. New York Times and MIT. And I also go to, Matt Wolf's site, Future Tools, though these are just news items that he adds manually. Oh yeah, please, spicy. Spicy is, spicy actually, my daughter always asks for spicy water. And spicy is her term for sparkling. So I've used Feedly in the past. I use InnoReader now. I actually also have, Fiery Feeds, which really is just consuming Actually, who am I using for InnoReader? Is not the actual RSS service. They're just consuming it from somebody else. I don't know who I'm consuming from. I don't want to look at something that's going to show you too much information. I think there's somebody else. It might be Feed. I don't know who I'm using. Anyway, I'm ready for that spicy tech, Scott. So anyway, there was that Future Tools. There's also one of the other places I get a lot from is Y Combinator. So Hacker News. The Stoic Parrot author. Anyway, so Hacker News. Anytime I see anything that's kind of AI-ish related, I will take a look at that link. So that's really good. There are some people that find Hacker News and Y Combinator to be super. All the folks at all the other people in Ollama loved Hacker News and like lived and died by what was in Hacker News. It's another source. It's not super important, but I like it. Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000. What? So, okay, so I think you meant Stoic Parrot author? I don't know what that means. Or did you actually mean Stoic? Stochastic Parrot. A little, yeah, okay, so Stochastic Parrot. That makes a lot more sense. Stochastic. Is there like somebody that is Stochastic Parrot author? Maybe you're gonna have to send me a link to that, whatever you're talking about. And then Mystery AI Hype. Spelled poorly. All right. Cool. Oh, a nice live stream. Okay. With the linguist. Cool. Yeah, I also listen to a bunch of podcasts. So there's the one that's oh, you were referring to, so Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000 is with something to do with Stochastic Parrot. Okay, gotcha. I think I gotcha. So there's the AI feed in Changelog, and a number of other daily AI podcasts, and so there's a bunch of others that I listen to there. I definitely do not keep up on all of those because some of them are like an hour long. Of course, I used to think nobody would ever watch a live stream for an entire hour. What nutcase would ever create a stream that is an hour long? Obviously, they didn't prepare. Otherwise, they could have done it in 20 minutes. And here I am at roughly an hour. Let's go back to my here. Yeah, I'm at an hour and 3 minutes. I'm the person I hate. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. So hopefully you found this useful. I think I already said that. I have a hard time of saying goodbye. I need to come up with my script of here's what I say when I say goodbye, and just stick to it, and just actually click on the stop button when I'm done. Because I feel like I should be more monumental. The departure, the leaving. I should just leave. Thanks again for everyone being here. I will try. Should I do this on weekends? I don't know. My family might not like it. But this is fun, and maybe I can come up with a shorter version for weekends. Oh, should I keep it up so we all see the, probably not still enough. Yeah, probably sees movement still. Just keep it there for a second. No, it's not going to glow. Well, it's not going to do it. The bottom of this water bottle glows when because I think my Bluetooth is off on my phone. So it will synchronize with my phone so that I can keep track of how much water I drink, because I never drink enough water. I suck at that. 5-minute news. Can I do 5 minutes? Doing things shorter always takes longer to prepare. And one nice thing with this, maybe I should prepare more than I do, is that it requires a little bit less effort, and then I can do it. But 5-minute news, maybe that's possible. Maybe I can do a summary of the best items. I have to think about what is the right thing to do on the weekend. Maybe just do a Saturday show and that's a summary. Yeah, I'll play around with that idea. All right, I'm really gonna say goodbye. I'm gonna say goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna find that end stream button and be done with it. All right, let me end it here. Should I end it here first?